Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, and this is our final pre-election podcast. By the next time you hear our voices, it'll be after the election. Although, for some of you listening to this late, it is after the election. Hello anyway. This will all be old news. Joining me today are my two lovely co-hosts, Bailey Perkins-Wright. Hello, Bailey.
Hello, Andy.
And Dr. Scott Melson. Hello, Scott.
What is up?
Rain. It is cold. It is rainy. We've had several seasons today in Oklahoma.
I'm so excited. It's finally some good weather. This is my weather,
outside when the rain hit, and that was less exciting. There was a lot of, I was moderating a panel at the OU Health Sciences Center for the Oklahoma Alliance for Healthy Families, and it was a lot of fun. But on my way, as is always the case on the Health Science Center campus, from my experience of working there for 10 years, construction inhibited my ability to walk from building to building. And so I had to go outside and then around a building because the entrance was under construction. And so right as I was doing that, through the little, like the construction hallway, this is common in big cities where they're doing high-rise construction. It's like plywood around a fence and you walk along. It just a gully washer, like the skies opened up and it was just a torrential rainstorm. And I'm, of course, in a suit. So I just had to bide my time there in the cold for a few minutes while it passed. Thankfully, It did.
Well, I had a situation that wasn't as fancy as yours. I was grabbing lunch and walked in to the place where it started sprinkling, grabbed my lunch. And when I returned, it's pouring down. So it's cold, it's raining. And then where I parked where I opened my car door, there's mud right there. So
I was in a room with a patient and I heard it start pouring and then it stopped.
But one of the three of us was dry.
That's good. Well, since this is our last podcast before the elections, we'll be brief because I think at this point, honestly, we're just prognosticating about what might happen, and by next Tuesday we'll know, right? We'll find out, and in our next episode we'll review on what happened. So I maybe today let's talk a little bit about most recent polling that came out, and then we'll talk about just polling in general and how nobody has a goddamn idea about what's actually going to happen. And then I don't know, let's cast our lots and see what the three of us think the most likely scenarios might be, and how that will play out. How does that sound?
That sounds great. And I thought I had a good handle on where I was going to go for this, but I just got some brand new information. I was just scrolling through my social media here, and there's a post from former Senator Yen and his campaign, and he says that the quote unaffiliated polls, those show the race to be extremely close between him, Governor Stitt, and whoever Democrat Hoffmeister is. I'm not familiar with Democrat Hoffmeister. I know Joy Hoffmeister, but so apparently the real polls, the unskewed polls, show that former Senator Yen is right there in the thick of things. So I'm gonna have to reevaluate what I think about the governor's race in light of this new information.
Sounds like he needs to write a book about how you go from single digits to tight race, right? Because that's a hurt.
And he's trying to double down on his Republican status that he abandoned to be an independent to try to, because he thinks he's going to take votes away from Hoffmeister. I'll tell you what this sounds like. This sounds like the Stitt campaign was like, bro, we need you to help out. Or, yeah, I guess so. To try to draw back some of those Republican voters who would have voted for Joy, but if they can vote for Yen instead.
Well, no, he says, don't let the fake push polls deter you from voting for me. Hoffmeister says a vote for me will keep Stitt in office. Stitt says a vote for me will put Hoffmeister in office. Both are false claims in an effort to scare voters into voting for them. The unaffiliated polls show this race to be extremely close between myself, Governor Stitt, and Democrat Hoffmeister. The Democrat Hoffmeister language is interesting. I think that I see your point, Andy. I think that that's less an attempt to get people to vote for the governor and more of an attempt for him to try and emphasize the fact that he's the independent in the race. I think many people see the fact that Joy, was a Republican for such a long time, held office as a Republican and then switched parties. I think there's a lot of and this is what I think the Stitt campaign is trying to do as well. Okay, well, Joy switched parties because she didn't want to run the primary, but really she's a Republican, right? Like there's Democrats that think that. And so
Right.
I think the emphasis on Joy Hoffmeister and Joe Biden are, basically secret lovers, and Democrat Hoffmeister. I think this is trying to get people, don't vote for Joy Hoffmeister, vote against her party, right?
Right.
So
Well,
I see a point. So I think this particular instance is not so much trying to emphasize her Democratness, so you'll vote for the governor. It's to emphasize her party affiliation, so you'll vote for an independent.
right. I mean, strategically, I get that, right? Because let's say, and this is not going to happen, but let's say in general terms, if Joy gets every Democratic vote, she also needs a bunch of Republican and independent votes, right? I haven't done the math on the vote share, but I'm sure that her party or her campaign has. Stitt needs all the Republican votes he can get, and that's it. I mean, he can stand to lose some to her and still win the election, right? Based on voter affiliation, because there's not that many libertarians. They'll go to Bruno. So then Yin, as the independent, is potentially like a spoiler in there, and if he can pull some of the Republicans that would have gone to Joy, but if he can pull those and keep them for him, then that means that her vote share goes down, but Stitt stays the same, and that would be good for Stitt, right? Like I understand, as a Republican tactic, it makes sense. Do you think it's actually going to happen though?
Well, and what if it doesn't pull the
Mm-hmm.
moderate Republicans?
Right. What if it pulls
What
from
if
Stitt
it
instead?
pulls the people who may be frustrated altogether, or even, let's say, there may be conservative teachers or conservative tribal citizens who vote for Yen over, it really is just going to depend on election day itself. Like, to your point, Scott, I think this was an effort to try to define what it means to be independent, because there really is no definition. It's become a catch-all for people who may be frustrated with either party affiliation and doesn't feel quite a home. So I do think it is an attempt to figure out how to define independent. But if you're saying don't vote for the Democrat, does that even mean that those were going to be the people who were going to vote for Joy in the first place? So it's an interesting tactic. But for one, I saw a tweet by Kyle Hilbert that was stated so well that, the polling says for this poll that Joy is in the lead, and then this poll says Kevin's in the lead. But at the end of the day, the only poll that matters is what happens between now and Tuesday at 7:00, right? And so it is really critical that no one leave it to chance, that we have as many people get to the polls as possible, because any scenario could take place. It could be a Joy Hoffmeister squeaks by. It could be a Kevin Stitt wins re-election. We just don't know, because it really depends on what the voting base is going to look like.
So kind of getting into just what is our best assessment of the state of the race right now. So because we are not statisticians, I have tried to play one in the past, looking at the 538 polling average. So the 538 polling average as of today has Stitt plus 3.2. So Governor Stitt polling at 47.6 with Joy Hoffmeister polling at 44.4. That is important for two reasons. One, it shows Governor Stitt ahead, but two, it shows Governor Stitt under 50%. So those are two kind of important points there. If you look at 538's their model and their prediction for the outcome of the race, they're predicting Governor Stitt wins by about 10 points. 53-43 is their projection for voting night. Interestingly, if you go through and look at all of the most recent polls of the governor's race, which is what I am doing right now, staring at a spreadsheet that has all the polls, there are three polls in the last 6 weeks or so that show Governor Stitt with a double-digit lead. One is by American Viewpoint. That was from September 26th to 28th. That had Stitt plus 15. There was another one from October 28th to October 31st by WPA Intelligence that had Stitt plus 13. One important thing that both of those polls have in common, they were commissioned, sponsored, and paid for by the Kevin Stitt campaign. So those were polls that were commissioned by the governor, and they show him with a massive, massive lead. However, there is one poll by Emerson College, which is an A-rated pollster. This was from October 25th to 28th. It's the largest survey, so it was 1,000 people, and it's Emerson College's likely voter model. That showed Governor Stitt plus 10. So the Emerson College poll from the 25th to 28th of October, which is the biggest and the pollster that at least has probably the best track record, does show the governor up by 10 points, which is what 538 is projecting his victory to be. This is one of those deals, right? Like if you look at the average of the polls, has this as about a 3-point race. To me, on the ground, this feels like about a 3-point race. Now, I also live in Oklahoma County, so that's a bias. We'll see what happens. I talked to a couple of folks this week that have that are in touch with the Hoffmeister campaign, and also in touch with the Stitt campaign. From what I'm hearing, both campaigns' internal polling show the race essentially tied. Which is why you saw, Governor Stitt dump $1 million into his campaign over the weekend. It's why you see Superintendent Hoffmeister. She's doing her barnstorming tour of the state in the Joy bus, or bus of joy, whatever they're calling it. So I don't know. Nothing will surprise me. A Kevin Stitt win by double digits it would surprise me a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked. A Hoffmeister win by 3-4 points wouldn't stun me. I think that's well within the possibility. I think the thing I'm going to be watching, there's two things I'm going to be watching for on election night. One, as rural precincts come in, is Governor Stitt winning the rural parts of the state by single digits or double digits. If he is winning the rural parts of the state by single digit margins, I think he could be in for a rough night. I'm also looking for how much Superintendent Hoffmeister carries Oklahoma County. I think I have every reason to think she's going to carry Oklahoma County. I'm also looking at turnout in Oklahoma County. If turnout in Oklahoma County is up from where it has been traditionally, and Governor Stitt is in the single digits in terms of margin in rural Oklahoma, to me, those are going to be signs that Superintendent Hoffmeister could have put this thing away.
Well, and Scott, you mentioned the polling data and the trends that the polls were saying, but those polls were also taken before there were some important endorsements that came out. J.C. Watts, for instance, who is a notable Oklahoman who is well respected by many conservatives, has such a history with the Republican Party, not just in Oklahoma, but even nationally, right? For him to come out directly and support Joy Hoffmeister, to me, could be a game changer, especially for those Republicans who have been historically Republican, that have been on the fence, to be either thinking about their decision or deciding not to even vote in that race, right? Same thing with Michael Thompson. He had a tweet that basically could be perceived as an endorsement, who is a person who led the National Guard, right? So as we're continuing to go on over these next few days, there's so many factors that could lead to Scott's point, that 3% for Joy or tipping the other way for Kevin Stitt, right?
I do think it's important to mention, Bailey, you mentioned Congressman Watt's distinguished career as a Republican politician here in Oklahoma as a member of Congress. However, you neglected to mention his most important part of his resume, which is as quarterback of the Oklahoma Sooners from 1979-1980 with consecutive Orange Bowl victories. So
I would say that's not even the most important part. I mean, what people forget is he's the first Black person in the state to achieve a statewide office. Yeah. He's the only an elected statewide office. Let me be clear, not sit in a statewide office, but being elected too from the Corporation Commission. So yeah, I mean, he's known for not only the football, but like just the political history. So it is a big deal for some of these endorsements to come out a week before the election.
And you mentioned how well respected he is among conservatives, and you are of course right. I jest when I say that his football accomplishments are the most important line on his resume, but I think for a number of reasons, I think Congressman Watts is widely respected in Oklahoma on both sides of the aisle. You know, endorsements I think are often one of those things that get a lot of press but don't really move the needle. When he came out with that this week that he was endorsing Joy Hoffmeister, I think I texted Andy when I saw that, and I was like, you know what, this is a big deal. This is an endorsement that might actually move some people.
And you know, it reminds me of the 2020 election, right? When you saw Michael Steele and other prominent Republican leaders coming out in support of Joe Biden. I think that's what helped tip the election for Joe Biden, was having enough Republican support because of the way that he was positioning himself as a moderate leader who wanted to bring us back to civility, right? That was the big push for his campaign. And Joy Hoffmeister has modeled that playbook at the state level, and it seems like it is effective to get some of those key conservative leaders, right, to be able to speak out. So that's why to me, it's hard to even say what election day is going to look like and how to predict, because it really is going to depend on not only just turnout, but like we talked about this in the past, like are there going to be people who skip over the governor's race, right? Because I feel like there's going to be differences. I'm going to be looking at how many people vote in each election. I think that Gina Nelson could be the next state superintendent of public instruction, because it seems like Ryan Walters is doubling down when it comes to the rhetoric that Oklahoma educators and others aren't looking for in a state superintendent, right? So I don't know if that rhetoric is going to match up for that race, because the polling data, as Scott was talking about, also shows Gina ahead still in those races. So, and it helps also to Scott's point about watching for what the votes are going to be in some of the urban areas. There are a number of competitive races that are taking place right now, from the DA's race that's going to be critical in Oklahoma County. There's a number of House and Senate seats where members have resigned their seats that are going to be open seats that are going to draw a lot of turnout, right? And so I think those down ballots, there's going to be a mutual relationship up and down ballot that's going to be able to draw greater turnout in these areas. So
yeah, I'll I will link in the show notes to an article on 538.com from yesterday or the day before. Scott, I think you actually are the one that sent it to me, but it's from Nathaniel Rakich, and it basically describes what we all know to be true, right? That polls are not certainty.
And they're moments in time.
there are moments in time things shift. Using some kind of polling average is helpful, and 538 has a polling average for the governor's race for Oklahoma and every other state. But even with that, because in a state like Oklahoma, this race is so close, right? So competitive that we can anticipate that there, I don't know, could be, likely will be, I'm not sure, a polling error, but it is impossible to predict which way, right? In 2016 and 2020, polls nationwide underestimated Republican support. And the article kind of goes on to say, like, is that going to be the same this year? Who knows, right? Pollsters could have overcompensated. Pollsters could have compensated just enough. Like, we'll find out on election day. But because here in Oklahoma, some of these races are so close, just like nationally, right? The balance of the Senate is so close, and arguably the balance of the House is close enough that if the polling error is in Republicans' favor, it really is a red wave, right? Like, they take both chambers in Congress, they win the governorship, Walters wins, all that stuff here, most likely, right? But if the polling error is the other direction, if it's in Democrats' favor, essentially, well, if the outcome is in Democrats' favor, I guess the polling error would be the opposite way. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. If it goes the other way, then nationally Democrats would gain seats in the Senate, potentially even gain a couple, I think, in the House, retain the House and gain a few seats. And then here locally in Oklahoma, I think we would see then, if it plays out the same here, it would nationally, Joy would win, Gina would win, Vicky Bahena would win. And then I don't know that there are any competitive seats that are competitive enough. Maybe in Tulsa, right? Suzanne Schreiber is running for the seat that was Carol Bush's seat. Carol Bush was a Republican. Suzanne's a Democrat. I forget the Republican in that race, but it's a pretty close. It's a kind of one of those purplish districts, right? So I think those things would trend towards Democrats. There's no scenario, though, just to be clear, where Democrats like flip the Oklahoma State legislature. Like, that's just not the way that voter turnout is going to look in Oklahoma.
That's not in the cards this year.
No, but I think it to kind of help put our state in context of what's happening nationally is somewhat helpful. I do want to just ask, Bailey, I know you've got to hop off in just a minute, but I think we should all just give our guess, if you feel comfortable, on what percentage of the vote you think Governor Stitt will receive on election day, right? Like on after this election. Now, there's a definite scenario where both he and Joy get less than 50%, right? And the winner has less than 50% if Senator Yen or Natalie Bruno, if they pull enough votes. So that's a possibility. But what do you guys think? Like, do you think he's going to win with 53%? Do you think he would win with 49? Do you think he would lose with 48.8? I mean, there's a lot of kind of wiggle room here in some kind of close election.
What I'm hopeful about is the rate of early voting that's taking place. There are a lot of ballots coming in for mail-in ballots. And then there's a lot of people early voting. Like, this is the first time ever in Oklahoma's history that we've had 4 days of early vote, right? So
I
Oklahoma
voted today,
voting
actually, yeah.
This year, starting on Wednesday. So we'll see what type of impact, right? Adding that extra day for voters to be able to cast their ballot will have. And we're seeing the largest early voting trends happen in those urban areas. So should the governor lose, it's going to be probably by a percentage point, if that. Mm-hmm. I don't suspect that it's going to be a wide gap, even 3%. I bet it's going to be a 50% plus one situation, or, just 0.5% higher, should that scenario take place. If the governor is to win, I do think it'll be about a 4 to 5% difference.
Interesting. Okay, I think you articulated that really well, Bailey, right? Like, if he wins, it'll be a decent win. I mean, not like a huge win, but like by several points. But if he loses, he'll just lose narrowly. That's an important distinction. That's fair. Yeah. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, if you're asking me what I think is going to happen, I don't know. I think it is going to be a close race. I think that I have a hard time seeing. I mean, Bailey's right. Like he certainly could win by 5 or 8 or 10 points. That's possible. I don't really think that's going to happen. I think this is a race that's going to be a race that's going to be decided between 2 or 3 points in either direction. If I had to, gosh, I mean, if I was putting money on it, I would bet that he ekes it out. I don't see him getting over 50%. I think whoever wins, they're going to win with a plurality. So, I could certainly see. I could see it 48, 46 Joy. I could see it 49, 49, 45 Stitt with Bruno and Yen getting a couple points here and there. But I think whichever way it goes, I think it is going to be close. I think it's going to be a, kind of in that, 2 to 3 point range, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I really am curious. The fact that that poll that came out this week from WPA, which is
that's Ted Cruz's polling firm.
Yeah, it's also the governor's, right?
Yeah,
WPA Intelligence.
Yeah.
So the fact that they had him up pretty substantially, but even in that, they it said
had him winning Gen Z by like 9 points, and it's like, come on, that's not right. Happening.
Yeah.
So I think, and the fact, again, I am confident in the information I've got, which is that the internals of both campaigns, the internals show a very, very tight race. And so I think that's what we're going to see on election night, and to your point and to Bailey's, is a Democratic trifecta in terms of these, local races. Is that less likely? Yes. I think a scenario in which, Hoffmeister and Nelson and Behenna all win their races is not likely, but it is absolutely possible and would not shock me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say this. I expect I expect at least one of them to win.
I think that's fair. I had to guess who. I would guess Behenna, just because it's only Oklahoma County, but we'll see. This is one of those races too where I'm almost interested in start digging into precinct level data. Maybe we can do that in the coming weeks. But I was poking around on Dave's redistricting app earlier today and looking at results from past elections and looking down at precinct level, and particularly in parts of the state where I kind of know the lay of the land a little bit from either living around there or traveling there or having friends that are from there and kind of studying it. And so it was really interesting to kind of reflect on the last couple of elections, and also on Dave's redistricting. They've added a new feature where you can color it by precinct, by shift, right? So from R to D or D to R, whatever, partisan shift, and you can choose the elections, right? So you can look at which precincts shifted more Democratic in 2020 versus 2016, for example, right? So that's interesting in Oklahoma, of which precincts are shifted more Democratic in Trump's reelection campaign, right? Some of them got redder, but a lot of them got a lot bluer. And so it was just those little nuanced data where I was like, oh, this is interesting. I mean, in the aggregate, as we kind of expect, metro areas, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, as well as those micro metro areas like Ardmore and Enid and Lawton, those places, the kind of urban core of those, to the extent that they could be called urban, the core of those tends to be more Democratic than Republican, which is really fascinating. Well, we'll find out. Scott, what's happening on election night?
I'll tell you where I'm going to be. I'm going to be at the Tower Theater. I'm going to be at Tower Theater on the stage with you and a band. and some great guests for the election night show. We did this 4 years ago. It was an absolute blast. We had several hundred people there. We watched the returns come in, had some good food, some good drinks, some good music. It was a good time was had by all. And I expect to see lots of people there this Tuesday as well.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. As I mentioned earlier, I was speaking to that or moderating that panel at the Health Sciences Center today, and had a number of folks, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't. The strangers were saying, "Hey, I'm looking forward to coming on Tuesday," and so that was exciting. I think there's a lot of folks who have been like active, right? Like we've had my last count was like 62 volunteers in the last 3 weeks that have helped us text bank. And they're all like, all right, I'm new at this, but I'm really jazzed about being involved. This is kind of fun. Can I, like, what's happening on election night? I want to be with my people. I want to be with folks who also care about the future of our state. I was like, well, let me tell you what's happening. Come on down to the Tower Theater. We will have Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt, former state senator AJ Griffin, local entrepreneur and I guess venture capitalist now, Erica Lucas. We'll have live music, as you mentioned, Cody Pruitt and the Secret Mansions. It's really just a camaraderie of a bunch of local musicians who kind of form in a band that's like full-on band, keyboard, a couple of different kinds of horns. Like it's going to be a lot of fun. They're all really dynamic artists on their own. It'll be fun for them to be playing together. I think they're going to play a bunch of like good covers, and I'm someone who loves a good cover band. They may play some originals as well. We'll have free food. There's a cash bar. You got to buy your own drinks, folks. We're a nonprofit. We can't afford to do that. But the Tower Theater does have an excellent bar, and it should be an absolute blast. I'm looking forward to it. Scott, what are you going to wear? Should we talk about this off the air? I've not.
Yeah. Dress code off the. We'll have to. I had some thoughts, but I wanted to confer with you.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll talk about that off the air. Audience, listeners, you wear whatever the hell you want. That's fine. It's a laid-back atmosphere. We'll have pizza. We'll have some sliders, chicken, fish. Maybe not fish. Maybe fish. I don't know. Chicken, burgers, and some other kind of sandwiches. It'll be a good time. Garlic knots, stuff like that. Easily consumable food that you will enjoy to keep you, if you need. For those of you who need to eat to fill your anxiety a little bit during the election results, we got you. All right. Well, listeners, thanks for hanging with us for another year. We'll probably do at least one episode post-election. We may take a break for the holiday season. And then we'll be looking forward to bill filing, which begins November 15th. We'll be looking forward to the start of the legislative session in February, the inauguration of whomever the governor is next. That will be in January. It'll be a really exciting time to be an Oklahoman and to be interested in this. And perhaps most importantly, at least more importantly, is that 2023 is not an off year, right? It is not an election year. There are city council elections in February. There is a statewide question, right, for recreational use marijuana in March. There's the session in February through May. Things are happening, and we are continuing to scale up, right? We've got more opportunities for you to be involved, more ways, and we need your help. Like, it's not about us as much as it's about you. We need you to lean in a little bit, and together we can really make a difference in Oklahoma. All right, on that note, that brings us to the end of the episode. Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Always.
Bailey had to hop off a few minutes ago for another call. Listeners, thank you for being here as well. As we say every week, decisions are made by those who show up. Don't forget to vote if you haven't already. And we'll see you on election night at the Tower Theater. Doors at 6, show at 6:30. Have a good weekend.